Dr. Meeta Singh is with us today, and Doc, it's really incredible to talk to you right away, as I know Dr. Fergus Conley sort of pointed me in your direction, and as I looked into it, the first day that I looked into where you're at, and you and I kind of had that initial email threading, Michigan and Minnesota. So how about that?
Yeah.
I'm originally from Farmington, Michigan, and obviously now out here in Minnesota. But for the listeners, Doc, you're going to talk to us a lot about sleep today and some of the things that you've learned with the athletic world and obviously all of your travels. But first and foremost, thank you for taking the time to jump on a podcast with me.
Harry, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm extremely, like I said before, press play. I'm extremely student oriented, which I obviously am always on these podcasts, but sleep is something that was crucial to my career. I think I missed tremendously on disciplining that. And now I'd like to try to help people and flip that a little bit. But without me talking more, can you create a little bit of what you're doing right now, kind of paint a picture of what you do in your career and sort of, I guess, identifying your job status so people can really understand the simplicity of what you do now before we get into the complexity of all the people you've trained with?
Sure. So I am a sleep medicine doctor, and I did a training. I did my psychiatry at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, which is our connection, and then I came to Detroit, Michigan, at the Henry Ford Sleep Disorder Center to do a sleep fellowship. And I've been there. I've been in practice now for, many years since then. And I, in the last few years, I also have a very niche clinical practice in which I see both college as well as professional athletes who have specific sleep disorders. And I also work with, again, both college and professional athletic teams and athletes with the goal of optimizing sleep, with end goal being optimizing performance by optimizing sleep.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome to really dive into that. And I know we have a pretty strong game plan of how we're going to do that. But before we even get into optimizing sleep, what was before you got into the Mayo Clinic and kind of moving back to Detroit, what was the trigger that led you down the path of wanting to even understand sleep?
So it's funny that you asked me that because, when I was doing my medical school, sleep medicine really wasn't much of, you didn't really talk about sleep. You didn't really learn about sleep. And so I was in my final year during a psychiatry residency when I did an elective, it's called a rotation, in which you spend about a month in a sleep clinic learning about sleep disorders. And it was fascinating. The sleep science is relatively new. The sleep medicine fellowship has been around for 35 years. Henry Ford, the place I work with, the Sleep Disorder Centers, is one of the first sleep disorder center in the world.
Wow.
And so Dr. Thomas Roth, Dr. Christopher Drake, Dr. Timothy Rears, these are just, giants in the field of sleep science. In fact, the main sleep textbook is edited by Dr. Thomas Roth. So it was, I've been lucky that I've, when I was either at Mayo Clinic or Henry Ford, I've always been surrounded by these giant minds. So I've got have had the opportunity to learn quite a bit from them. And I started initially working with the local NFL team, which is the Detroit Lions, because they had, so I started working there. And as the world of, athletic performance, athletic science is really small. So, from that, I started working with the local Major League Baseball team. And then, people who work in these teams, they travel, they go to different teams. So by word of mouth, I've spoken, I think, almost at every league meeting, all the different four leagues, and even worked with, individual athletes as well as, top teams.
That is
So
so
it's
cool. That is so cool to hear, especially from me growing up, and I have a little bias towards it too, growing up in Detroit. So the here in my hometown
Mhm.
teams is really special. But I even, again, I gotta even paint the picture even deeper because it is this a rather new sports science, athletic science in general, I guess, just humanity as a whole, to focus on sleep? Because I know we talked briefly. I played until 2015, and I know people always mentioned to me in college and professional baseball that sleep was important, but it doesn't seem, and I could be off here, but I know you'll be able to help here. Is it something rather new that we're putting a huge focus on this, or like or is that just something that I've noticed? But it seems like it's rather quickly adapting very fast in the field of sport performance that we need to put a huge focus on sleep.
Yes, so it is relatively new, and I think the reason it's relatively new is because of two reasons. Number one is, you know, you being a professional athlete or in your former life, professional athletes, they're just genetically, they are, they have these physical and cognitive abilities which get them where they are, and oftentimes, that's what they're doing, and they can get by without really paying attention to maybe. Sleep and nutrition as much because of their genetic prowess,
Yeah.
right? But then, that's number one. Number two is, as you, I'm sure, know, is, and as any old timer will tell you, till a few years ago, amphetamines and greenies were were frequently used
Oh
in Major
gosh,
League
yeah.
Baseball, right?
Oh,
And so
ridiculous. Yeah.
that masks the effect of sleep deprivation, and that really allowed players and teams to tolerate this, that long, arduous season they have, and all that sleep deprivation, and allowed them to, and of course now, rightfully so, that's been banned, and so I would say, in the last 10 years, there's been more and more research about sleep, and there's some giants in the sleep research field. So Cherry, Ma, and Dement did these sleep extension studies on student athletes a few years ago that clearly showed that if you get in more sleep, your performance improves, you're happier, you're healthier, and because there's more research, so people are more interested.
Yeah.
So it's new, but but it's getting the buy-in now.
Well, I love that you say that too, right? Because everyone, the research just validates what people have said for so long. But it also seemed like a badge of honor for strength
Right.
coaches, athletes to do the whole, I don't need sleep. And I'm sure you've probably had that conversation with people, I don't even know how many times. But do you think that
Right.
that's sort of shifting too? Because that has been the whole, I mean, I know a lot of guys still ride on that, well, I don't need any sleep or no sleep, and the no pain, no gain type of stuff that was the huge Greeny era and all those uppers and those sort of things. Is that, you think that that's starting to shift too in general of the way where people are sort of going, wow, no, we need to emphasize this?
Yes, I think there is a shift. Now, I will tell you that, you know, that sentence, that this is how we did it all along and we've been very successful, is one of the, one of the reasons that people may not bring new things into, a team,
Yeah.
because, but I agree, things are changing. I think they take time. I think it takes time. The education when it comes to teams has to be interesting. It has to be interactive. It has to apply and fit into their sports specific schedule, because otherwise whatever you tell them is completely useless, right? Because they're not going to listen unless it actually makes sense for them. So I think, yes, things are changing. And, speaking about just coaches, I mean, coaches, athletic trainers, they get there before the players.
Yeah.
They leave after the players are done, right? So they definitely need to get enough sleep. And if you think about the work that coaches do, which is, knowledge work, you put information, you take information, you put it together with previously stored information, come up with novel solutions, you communicate with your players. All of that is affected by less sleep. So coaches definitely need to get enough sleep.
Oh yeah. No, I think that leads us right into what I've been super curious about. And I know a lot of people who listen to us and people who are going to listen to this podcast are going to be excited to take some notes. So before we even get into it, folks, I mean, grab your pen and paper and get ready to lock it in. So you just mentioned there about scheduling and being able to simplify it. And I've noticed that, and I was the same way, and I think that that's hard too, right? An athlete really just wants to be told, okay, when do I do that? Okay, good, do that now, and they want it really simplified, which obviously you do a tremendous job, but to sort of start creating the visual of how this looks and how people can start adjusting for sleep. I mean, I look at it in terms of the principles, right, of home games versus compared to away games and how that comes to sleep. And I know you'll take this and run with it, but you look at it as being at home, very simply. I'm sleeping in my bed at home and then being away. Obviously, there was some travel there. There's a different environment. There's different filters and air conditioning, those sort of things. But when you sort of simplify the principles of home versus away games for professional athletes and sleeping, how do you kind of paint that picture, coach that, and then simplify it enough so that people can objectify progressing their sleep patterning?
So the principles of how to get a good night's sleep really should be the same whether you're traveling or if you're at home. So, firstly, count 8 or 10 p.m., hours backwards from the time you're supposed to wake up, and that is your bedtime, right? So if you don't have to be at the ballpark till about noon, you're going to go to, that's what your bedtime is. You go to bed later. So secondly, it's very important to develop a good winding down schedule. And so I tell people that in addition to using an alarm to wake up in the morning, set an alarm that will remind you that now you have to start preparing for bed. And a good winding down schedule should include a hot shower, some stretching exercises, maybe reading a book, meditation, some, stretching exercises. And basically, your bedroom should be cold, it should be dark, it should be quiet, it should be electronic free. And I know you mentioned home versus away game.
Yeah.
Now the funny thing is that many players will say they actually sleep better when they're traveling, rather because they have so many distractions with young families at home.
Oh yeah.
So that is something to keep in mind. And so, when you're educating players about protecting their sleep time, it's almost beneficial to educate like family members also that their sleep has to be protected. And of course, and we can discuss this later, because of the irregularity of schedule, because they're night games or they're day games.
Yeah.
All of that can affect sleep, and we can discuss that individually. But
Sure.
Really, simple principles are always the best way. And then if people are individually having issues with, sleeping in maybe a strange hotel room or other issues, then those should be addressed individually.
Yeah, that would kind of be the where you'd have to really dive in and probably learn more about those individuals, I'm sure, right?
Right. Yes.
That is so. It's wild to think. I never had I didn't have a family when I was playing or anything like that. But when you have young kids, or the wife or anyone who has a family going on, or vice versa. I mean, it could be if you're in a women's sport, the husband or whatever. And so you're looking at that. I mean, do you ever tell athletes or people in high stress situations, like do you ever guide them of how would you handle at home? Is it just sort of a free-for-all if your baby's waking up every 2 hours? I don't even really know the scheduling of young children waking up, but I got to imagine that plays the role of why I'd want to sleep on the away trips compared to being home.
Right.
You probably run into that a lot.
Yes. And again, like I said, you can only get to that if you have clear, candid conversations with your players.
Yeah.
Or athletes. I remember last year we had an athlete. I was working with this one guy. He just moved into a high rise in a beautiful downtown area of a cosmopolitan city, and he had adopted a puppy. And he had adopted a puppy, and we were talking about that, and he was in charge of taking the puppy out, and this was a conversation that he had to have with his girlfriend, that now that my spring training is over and actual season is going to begin, you're going to have to do a little bit more with the puppy at night so that I can sleep through. And so these are, again, that conversation you can have once you have the buy-in.
Yeah.
Sleep is something, it's personal, it's private, and to be selfish about your sleep, you can do that once you realize you need to prioritize it, and then you have to sort of involve the family, because especially if you're at home, because it happens in the home environment.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I know a lot of guys who take that they prioritize that. I mean, people get in arguments about the strictness of their sleep. You said something too that I've actually, it triggered me over a conversation I had last summer actually with a former Olympian, and it was about having the room be dark. And I've tinkered with this on my own life. I've covered the windows completely where I can't see anything, and even if it were 10 a.m. the next day, I wouldn't be able to see anything. But then I've also tried to have light so I could kind of raise with the sun, and I've just kind of thought about that on my own intuition, so I don't know the depths of that. But what can you go into more of like the light exposure in a room and sort of how you should manipulate that environment?
So, this is something we had planned to talk about later, but I'm glad you brought it up. Yeah. That's okay. No, that's okay. I think we should bring it up. So light is important because light during the day and darkness at night helps strengthen your biological rhythms. And so, because we live, as ballpark, as MLB players, you guys get more light during the day than, say, an NBA player.
Yeah,
because
true.
They drive into, and the facilities are all, they have only indoor artificial light. So very simply, and this applies to everybody, if you can make sure that you get enough light during your day, and then at night you can make sure that everything is dimmed down, so when you're talking about, windows, for example, I'll tell you, most hotels, especially where, ball players live, they all have, those night blinds that completely block out any light. So we're talking about, your bedrooms that have to be really dark. That's number one. The second thing also is that during the day, make sure you get enough exposure to bright light, but also, your handheld devices, your laptops, your cell phones, they're all a source of light because they're backlit. Yeah. And so you have to be careful about exposure to that too. So that's another thing to keep yourself, to be aware of it.
And yeah, no, absolutely. Does light exposure, like if I'm sitting, like right now, my house, is completely windows on the back end, and then I have natural windows up top. And I've actually, I mean, I don't know if it's placebo effect or not, but a lot of the reason why I wanted to move in here was because of how naturally lit up it is. I mean, we never use lights in the house, but I don't know if I've tried to do this. Is that light exposure? Do you have to be outside for that to be counting in the biological clock, or can I still be getting that sort of, chemistry rolling through just being indoors and having light coming through windows?
Okay, so let's back up, and for your audience, let's explain to them what biological clock is. Okay, so your circadian rhythms or biological rhythms, these are intrinsic time-keeping clocks that we have in every cell in our body, and that regulate every function on a daily basis. So for us, you and me, and all other human beings, the master circadian clock, it's located in your brain, and it's synchronized to the environment by exposure to light and dark. And so that's your circadian rhythms, right? So when you wake up in the morning, if you expose yourself to bright light, then gives an alerting signal to you. And think of light as an alertness pill.
Yeah.
And it keeps you awake, and it strengthens your circadian rhythm. And then total darkness at night helps you consolidate your nighttime activity. So for example, in darkness, our brain secretes a hormone called melatonin, which I'm sure you've heard about.
Mm-hmm.
And that melatonin is a signal to the brain that you're ready to sleep, because as human beings, that's what we do at night. That's our nighttime physiology. Now, like mice, for example, are nocturnal animals. And in them, darkness and the secretion of melatonin actually results in increased activity. So,
wow. Wait, can you say that again? That is fascinating.
Okay. So melatonin, which a lot of people use, it's like, they think it's over the counter. Well, they use it as an over the counter sleeping pill.
Yeah.
So melatonin is a natural hormone. It's a natural hormone that your brain secretes at night in response to darkness.
Mm-hmm.
And it sends a signal that you're ready for nighttime activity. And for human beings, for us, it signals that we are ready to sleep. So it's a signal for sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
But in nocturnal animals, like say mice or rats, when in darkness melatonin is secreted, it's a signal that they should become active.
Wow.
So that's the way physiology works. And I think we kind of digressed from your question, which was about windows. So if you were outside in a bright light, it would be 100,000 lux, right? And which is fantastic. And so if your rooms are brightly lit, that should be enough to shift your clock. But also remember that, again, I don't want to get too complicated, but so your clock is more sensitive to light at certain times. So light at night will make you go to bed late.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So that makes sense. So
makes sense.
At night, you really don't need 100,000 lux to go to bed late. And actually there's studies, and people have, there is different human beings have, they can vary in the amount of light it takes for them to shift their clock. So even something as low as 30 lux, which is like a bedside lamp, or just enough light from the telephone, your Apple, phone, or any phone.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say Apple, any backlit handed smartphone can be enough to shift your clock. So, timing is also very important.
Yeah, that is, and I know we'll talk about light exposure as we dive into it too, but I'm just thinking last night I was reading a little bit, and I had my lights on in my basement, and I got up to turn them off because I typically don't have my lights on late at night. I just use like a Himalayan rock lamp. Do you like to have some sort of red light and dim lighting at the house at night if I'm still doing things at night? And then I'm just thinking too, if I have a TV on and the whole room is dark, so if I'm in a hotel room and the whole room is dark on those away games, like I sort of asked in that first question, is that distance, is that a lot of exposure if the whole room is black and I'm just watching a movie and no phone, I'm not looking at anything close to my eyes, but the TV is in the distance of the room?
Well, so maybe it might not be as bad as a handheld smartphone or a laptop, but it is still bad, right? And so it's still not as good as it's not the same as being pitch dark. Plus, I'll tell you another thing that I just thought of. When most people, get ready to go to bed, they go in there, brush their teeth, wash their face, they turn on all the lights.
Yeah, they do.
That itself is a bad thing, right? That's the wrong time to be having those bright lights, which we have in the bathroom.
Yeah, would that help to have the Himalayan salt lamps?
Yes.
It doesn't. I guess it doesn't have to be that, but you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I think what you're saying is that so light. It of course, because depending on the wavelength, we have a large spectrum, and so the blue-green spectrum of light is worse. I mean, has a stronger effect on shifting your clock. So you want red light. You want light which is in the yellow or red spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
That's less. And the other thing is that, I tell people, if you're reading a book, you could read a book. In fact, reading a book, if you're trying to fall asleep, is a good thing. It kind of helps you, you stop thinking about the fact that, right, it might help you calm down. And then, you can get these book neck lights, reading lights that shine the light only on the book and are not shining into your eyes. And that itself is a good thing.
Oh, that is really cool. This is super cool to hear. I'm loving this. It's just because it's so important, and I like reading books at night. It's kind of my quiet time, and that's one of the things I've been trying to figure out, and I haven't thought about that yet. So that's great advice. And so I know to kind of keep moving it forward, we touched a little bit on travel time, and so if we look at that first question of home games versus away games, well, let's take the plane and let's fly to an away game. And it's funneling off of everything you're saying. So I'm just imagining I'm playing for the Detroit Tigers and I'm flying to go play the Los Angeles Angels or whoever. I'm going to San Diego. I'm getting ready to go to California. So I'm going to play in a night game and artificial light. The sun has gone down now, so it's dark and there's light out. And then I travel and I fly over the country for however long that is, a 3-4 hour flight. I guess I have a lot of questions in this, but to simplify it, let's start with just the fact of what if you just simply can't sleep on a plane, or that I guess you're changed. There's a lot I have in this. I'm trying to hit only one thing because I guess
so let me
take it.
Let me make this simple. So first of all, since you're a MLB insider, you know often when players are not sleeping on the plane, they're playing cards.
Right.
They're doing other things.
Yeah.
Right. And so really the place to begin with is education. Focusing on educating players about the importance of sleep, explaining about sleep science, the cumulative effects of sleep deprivation. Because if the player doesn't want to, he's going to find other things to do while he's on the plane. Now, once a player is committed, you want to make the environment sleep friendly. So, make sure you get eye shades, neck pillows, noise canceling headphones. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but avoid alcohol and caffeine because they're both bad for your sleep.
Absolutely.
Chewing tobacco is bad for your sleep. Again, avoid electronics. Don't say video games. And again, oftentimes, rather than, taking the pressure that I have to sleep, maybe, put your headphones on, put your eye patch on, practice deep breathing, maybe listen to a relaxing audiobook or a podcast. So these are all good places to begin. So that's where I would
start.
Say the emphasis. Yes. That's where I would start.
Yeah, you're creating an awareness to it, really. And you are right. I mean, it's up to the player, and you nailed a lot of the trio there, the caffeine, the alcohol, and the tobacco. That's a heavy usage on any flight, right? So it's
right.
But also, does radiation, or I guess the elevation of that, does that play a role in, like, if you're drinking on a plane, obviously you get buzzed faster or those sort of things. But
yes, you do.
Does sleeping on a plane and being up that high in the sky or radiation, anything like that, does that affect, like, if you let's say you slept for the 4 hours, is it a good sleep, or you're getting disrupted, you're waking up and moving to your hotel? I mean, is it just try to get to sleep because you need to try to get to sleep? Or how does that sort of affect your sleep pattern and just sleeping on a plane in general?
So I think that's a very good question. And again, that has to be decided on an individual basis. Okay. Now, whenever you're flying, there is always a slight reduction in oxygen levels, right? So sometimes people do sleep a little poorly. The second thing is that sometimes when players, they fly, and they take like a 3-hour nap on the plane. When they get to the hotel, they're like a hotel room, they're wide awake. So that's, strategically, you have to decide what works for yourself. And that's the whole point of having a sleep specialist, so that we can, so that, and remember, or I shouldn't say remember, but most people are fine once they've been given the education and they've been given the tools and they're able to sleep. If you're still having issues, well, that's the time to talk to somebody so that you can get to the bottom of it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The thing about Major League Baseball also is the time zones, right? So remember that biological clock we were talking about.
Yep.
So where are you located right now?
I'm in Minneapolis, so Central Time Zone.
Okay, Central Time Zone, right? So if you're in Minneapolis and you took a plane and flew to California, which is 2 hours,
yeah, should be
right
2
away,
right?
So basically, what happens is that whenever you cross time zones and you do it rapidly, your biological clock, which was synchronized to your home time zone, now is out of sync. So your biological rhythms lag behind, and that's what causes all those symptoms of not getting enough sleep or not being able to sleep or being excessively sleepy. And there's actually a lot of research in Major League Baseball. So they found, I know there was a study that looked at travel, and they found that the more time zones you cross, the less likely you are to win. And then there was a study.
Go ahead.
There was a study that came out, I want to say a couple of years ago, and they looked at 20 years of Major League Baseball games, and they found that jet lag can wipe out home field advantage. So these were East Coast teams. When they came back after spending some time on the West Coast, they were now jet lagged to their own home.
Oh, yeah.
And so when they were playing, especially if their opposing teams were coming from the same time, they're coming from the East Coast, so the pitchers were giving up more home runs. It was taking the punch out of some of the team bats, so it cost them home field advantage. So it definitely affects performance.
That is that is heavy, because in Major League Baseball they're not scheduling your games. Like, they're not paying. There's no way they pay attention to that, do they?
No, they do, actually.
Oh, they do. Okay, so I would have known that.
They do. So I've spoken at the Major League Baseball, the winter meetings. I spoke in 2017, and the league office constantly, they do invite experts to give them some advice. Now, the problem is that your season is really long.
Very long.
Right? And the season is long, and you're playing a game every day. I think now the league says that you get 1 day off every 10 days, so 2 days off in a month. But they try to lump. So now what they do is that they send you, from, say, if you're on the East Coast, they send you to the Central Time Zone, then to Mountain Time, then to East West Coast Time, and then slowly make your way back. But it's cumulative. The fatigue is just cumulative.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's really cool. I didn't know that they did that, because something that I've always thought about, and I don't know the science behind this. This is just a theory that I've had. I had a friend fly here from California to do a show probably 2 months ago, and we were sitting there in a sauna and we were talking, and I was telling her how, it's rather new to the human body, or the circadian rhythm, or the biology of our body, to get up and change time zones this quickly. Like, when at any point as a human did we leave? Like, right now it's cold in Minnesota. If it's not cold in California, at what point did we migrate from a cold environment to a warm environment in the matter of hours? And that does happen early in the season. I mean, if you play baseball for the Twins in April, it's cold. And then if you go to Texas, it's not. So how much does that disrupt the cells or the circadian rhythm? Or does the body, because how does a human brain or body adapt that quick? Is it even possible?
Well, so very simply put, it takes about one day per time zone
Okay.
of travel to get adjusted, right? So,
Wow,
so
that's
think
cool.
back. You're absolutely right, because we now are taking a plane, right? So, supposing, if you were going from New York City to, say, Europe, to, say, London,
Yeah.
if you took a ship, you would not get jet lag, because
Right.
you were doing it slowly over a period of 7 days. But if you took a plane, you would get severely jet lagged, because now, of course, your biological rhythms are completely lagging behind. But when it comes to, as you know, spring training, I think the spring training, the games are all usually day games, and then they have to shift to night games.
Yep.
And I always think of baseball players like as night shift workers.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and then every third or fourth game is a day game. So now you are supposed to go to bed 3 hours earlier, wake up 3 hours earlier, be at the ballpark. And so there are many things in that schedule that are, they are built-in difficulties that you really need a nuanced approach, and kind of look at how the instructions have to be on a team level and then on an individual level of how to cope with this schedule.
Yeah, that is so powerful to hear too, because I mean, humans are going to cope, right? So if I don't know
Yep.
how to naturally cope, I'm going to reach for whatever I can grab
Right.
to play.
Right.
And that's where you find the uppers and downers and the roller coaster
Yep.
of now you're at the mercy of how long you can last.
Right. And so now, we are digressing here, but, as you know, that, typically ADHD, the diagnosis in the population is, I think, 4 to 5%. In Major League Baseball, it's 10%. And that's not to say that there are not players who really have ADHD,
Right.
they're allowed to have Adderall if they carry that diagnosis. And as you know, Adderall is a stimulant.
Oh yeah.
And so what players do, because it helps them focus, it makes them more alert. Now, what is the time that players need to take it? They take it before their games.
Yeah.
And so if you take the Adderall and you take it, before a 7 p.m. game, well, 6 hours or 7 hours later, when you're trying to go to sleep, it's still in your system.
Oh man.
And so,
yeah.
Right,
That's
then,
got to crush you to know that someone's doing that before a game.
right. And most players, or many of the players, will take it at that time, because when else do they need to be focused?
For sure.
If it's not, they want to be focused for the game. And so, and these are long-acting medications. So,
no,
yeah,
I listened to a presentation that you did on I think it was on YouTube, but I think you even mentioned, I don't know if I have this on something I wanted to ask you, but you talked about caffeine as a half-life too, and how
yes.
And that is something that's really, really crucial to understand as well, because you look at, let's say you pitch in the end of a game and you might not play until 9, and guys are in there ripping a Red Bull right before they go out and pitch, and the back half of that isn't coming until 3 a.m. or whatever.
Yes. So so just to simplify it for your listeners, so caffeine, it takes about 20 to 25 minutes to take effect.
Okay.
Its half-life is 5 to 6 hours. So if you take it let's assume you've drunk, caffeine at 7 p.m., that means that around 11 o'clock, half of it is still in your system, right? And then, of course, individually, there are people who are slow and fast metabolizers. And so that makes a difference. It can stay in your system for longer. And so then you need, then as, I hate to say this, but that's why people, they drink beer.
Yeah.
Because to cut the effect of the caffeine, all the caffeine that they've had in their system. The other thing, caffeine definitely is a stimulant.
Mm-hmm.
It reduces your reaction time. It does help with accuracy. It makes you faster. It makes you more alert. But there was this really nice study that looked at the effect of caffeine on judgment, and what they found is that these stimulants they may make you faster, but they don't really they don't improve your judgment. So when you're drinking a lot of caffeine, you're just making poor decisions, but you're just doing it faster. So
that is
just something to.
Yeah, I'm really happy you said that, because we talk a lot about breathing, and I always talk about when your respiratory rate increases, your problem solving in your part of your brain goes down. And that would be be exactly what you're saying too. I mean, you're basically taking a stimulant, you're going to raise your rate of breathing. So now, and performance is making choices. It's solving problems.
Yes.
Which is very cool to hear. And so I look at it. Okay, so I was laughing about this because I know you did some stuff with the Nationals, and I was thinking about the glasses they were wearing.
Oh, okay.
And
right.
Yeah, was that something that was I just completely off on that, or was that scheduled to sort of help them control the clock or control their energy, I guess, because that's what we're talking a lot about right now. Is how do you control energy? I
got to tell you, I had nothing to do with it.
Oh, yeah, no, that's what I was laughing about, because I thought to myself, I was like...
Right. That was just a good luck thing about the orange glasses, right? However, orange glasses that block blue light are a great thing to use at night, right? Yeah. So we talked about how light suppresses melatonin at night, and of course, ideally you want them to not be on their cell phones. You don't want them to play video games at night. But if you can't, if they can, there is a role for wearing these blue light blocking glasses at night, because it'll reduce the amount of blue light, and that might be effective. So it's a great tool to have. But the orange glasses was just a fashion statement that the athletes decided to make.
So that is, I thought that before we even kind of got in touch, I thought people were doing that for that reason, to avoid the artificial light of stadium lights.
But here's the thing. That would be the wrong time to do it, right? Because you want the stadium lights to keep you alert when you're playing. So you don't want to wear, so these orange colored glasses that the athletes were wearing, they're just fashion glasses. They're not blocking out any specific light. You want light exposure if you want to maximize alertness.
And so you're saying, like, we want to, and that's kind of the next thing, right? Because now you get out of a game and it's late at night, 10 o'clock, and you've been exposed to light, which is a good thing, because you're in the sympathetic, right? You're sort of a controlled adrenaline. So that's what you need to perform at that sort of level. Now, when we get out of that, are you immediately telling players to get out of light? Or because you're still, I know one of my things I was really interested in asking you is, because if I'm trying to eat, how am I digesting the food in a sympathetic state? I'm coming out of the artificial light, the auditory system of how loud it is. There's a lot of stressors, and it's late at night. And so you're saying it doesn't matter that much if we can sleep in. It's not going to affect us that much, or do we need to start immediately shifting? Is there an in order deal? Is it a shifting the light, getting out of lights? Is it a breathing before you eat? All that sort of stuff you said with the plane. Is there sort of like a checklist that you would just generalize for people right after a game to start downshifting?
Yes. So all the things that actually make you a good athlete make it more difficult to wind down.
Okay.
Right. So if you're playing, it's hyperarousal associated with the game, like increased body temperature, adrenaline, increased caffeine use, circulating levels of cortisol is high. You may have muscle aches or pains or injuries, bright light, all that excitement of either winning the game or the stress of losing. So all of that contributes to difficulty sleeping. Mm-hmm. So it's important, first of all, to recognize this. Now, I think you had a question in there of if they should be allowed to sleep in.
Yeah.
Yes. The answer is really simple. especially Major League Baseball players, they should come into the ballpark as late as they possibly can to get started with their day. And the reason that's important is because they're not falling asleep. Once they may not sleep before midnight or 1 a.m. anyways, or sometimes later, right? Depending on how stimulated they are. But if you allow them to sleep till about noon and get to the ballpark at about, after any time after noon, then that they get a full night of sleep and they can make it. And so, there are some circumstances that you can't do that. Like, for example, when you have a day game immediately after a night game, you want to try to go to bed slightly earlier, and you should, again, remember we talked about the winding down schedule. So you do all of that. You sort of try to fall asleep, but many times you can't. And I would, and that's when players may reach for a pill. I would suggest that you let that be. If you get a good night of sleep, the 3-4 days leading up to that one night when you're going to get less sleep, you're okay. And then the next day after that, you play catch up because you got less sleep the night before. So now's the time to start getting more sleep now that you have an opportunity to sleep in. A series of night games is a great time to get enough sleep because you can go to bed late, you can sleep in.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know we're going to talk into that sleep banking too a little bit and something that you mentioned to me, but that is good to hear as well as sleeping in long because, and I know we talked about changing time zones if we use the Detroit to California analogy. So if I'm getting into California, I don't need to be concerned with, and I have a night game. So let's say I played a night game in Detroit and then I have a night game wherever the next away game. I don't need to try to get up early to set my clock with the sun. I can just sleep as long as I can, and that'll start happening.
Right. So there is a very specific way that you prepare when an East Coast team is going to the West Coast.
Okay.
And you can do that by sort of delaying your bedtime slowly. Maybe beginning even here while you're in the East Coast. The only problem is oftentimes, they have a day game before you travel.
Oh yeah.
So that's the bad thing. So because then you have to kind of wake up early, right? So my suggestion is that when you get on that plane that is going from the East Coast to the West Coast, go well rested.
Okay.
So fill up that bank of sleep when you get on the plane. And then when you're at the West Coast, you use strategic light as well as scheduled bedtime. So one of the things that I do with teams is, I give them, timely cues of what time they should sleep, what time they should wake up, when they should expose themselves to bright light, what time they should take a nap in case they wake up too early while they're on the West Coast. But these are all things, that you do based on their, once you have the schedule in front of you of how to adjust to the new time zone.
Well, and that's that, and we talked on that, right? Like, what are the best ways to prepare for sleep days in advance or days, leading up to that? And I know you're touching on that right now, but can you go deeper into that if you don't have sort of coaching and you're looking at your own schedule? Because I'm even thinking of a minor leaguer, right? I know they don't change as drastic, but yeah, go ahead.
Right. So it's the concept is called banking sleep.
Okay.
And it's really interesting because and first let me explain why we talk about it as banking sleep. So there's research that shows that if somebody is getting extra sleep or gets 7 to 9 hours of sleep for a week, that makes them more resilient to subsequent chronic sleep restriction when they're getting less sleep. So in a sense, when you're getting extra sleep, you're sort of filling up your pot of sleep, and that allows you to tolerate the sleep deprivation that's going to come up. And let me explain that to you. So although we also say that you can't really consume more than your sleep needs. So, it's not banking in the true sense, but because most people have some amount of sleep deprivation, you always want to play catch up prior to knowing when you're going to be sleep deprived. I'll give you an example. So if I knew that on Monday I'm going to be on call in the hospital, and so I'll be getting less sleep, the worst thing I can do is to sleep less on the weekend, right? Instead, I would be better off if I slept longer and I, took naps and was well rested. I banked sleep before I could before actually going into the weekend, before I knew I would be on call. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's like putting equity into a bank account.
Right. Exactly. So, and that is the only way to approach a long baseball season. You look at opportunities when you can get enough sleep, you make sure you get enough sleep. Then when you travel or when you have a day game, immediately after a night game, you get less sleep, but then you recover. You recover by, again, napping and building up that bank of sleep again. And you do that, all the time. Now, we talk about consistency in bedtimes is really, really important. So regularity is good. But, the Major League Baseball schedule, or even like the NBA schedule or the NHL schedule, you can't be consistent.
No.
And if you can't be consistent, then the whole, then you just have to keep the principles of banking, sleep, napping, and playing catch up. And you have to do this on a regular basis. Whether you're winning, whether you're losing, you can regularly do that so that you don't let this the sleep debt completely accumulate and overtake you.
Does the napping, do you schedule, does the napping have to be long or short? Because I've heard a lot of stuff on napping just in general for many years. Like a 15-minute nap is the key, or don't take I'm just thinking of general things I've heard or read or been told in the past. Like a long nap might exhaust you too much, or maybe just take a quick nap, or don't drink caffeine before you nap, or take caffeine before you nap and then you get the effects when you wake up. I've heard so many things around napping. Do you just kind of simplify it for an athlete and say, hey, you need to get some sleep banking in, or some equity in your recovery? Just take a nap for as long as you can.
Well, I got to tell you, napping is my favorite subject. So we can really talk a lot about it. So, okay. So the first thing you asked is how long should the nap be? Mm-hmm. So even a 15 to 20, 25-minute nap is a good nap. It's called a power nap. What it does is it takes away from your sleep drive that's accumulated during the day. And so it gives you some energy. Mm-hmm. So then the second amount length would be about a 35-minute nap, because that would be include a little bit of stage N2 sleep, which is which is still light sleep but slightly more refreshing. And then of course there's the granddaddy of naps, which is a 90-minute nap. So a 90-minute nap, you have a full sleep cycle. So you have light sleep, deep sleep, dream sleep, and then you wake up. And so that will keep you, that's a good sleep. That's the kind of nap that, NBA players like to take. Mm-hmm. So the second, of course, is the timing. When do you want to take a nap? You want to, you and I and all of us, we have a time during the day when we feel a little tired. Sometimes it can be post-lunch. For Major League Baseball players who've woken up at noon, it may be later, in the afternoon or whenever. That's the time you want to take a quick nap. But the two things you don't want to do is you don't want to nap too close to your game time. Oh. Because when you wake up, sometimes, from a nap, you may feel a little groggy for a little while. You want to be fully alert. You want to have at least a gap, about a hour-long gap, so you're fully alert before the game actually begins. Mm-hmm. And the second thing is that when it comes to lengths of naps, you want the nap, you don't want to wake up between 45 to 60 minutes after you went to sleep, because then you tend to wake up from deep sleep, and then you're going to feel that grogginess more. You know how you were describing how you wake up, you kind of feel worse.
Yeah.
And you almost feel like you're like a little drunk. That's that's a 60-minute nap when you're woken up from a deep sleep. So I would say either keep it less than 35 minutes or, sleep till a full sleep cycle, which is 90 minutes.
Is that where I have a guy that plays in the NFL that's a very good buddy of mine, and he always just tells me about sleep. Like you said, the 90-minute segment, like he always says he tries to get, I can't remember the exact number, but he looks at sleep cycles throughout the week, and he just tries to hit those cycles. So he always says in the 90-minute, or 90-minute, 3 sets of that is a good sleep. I try to get, I think, like 36 sleep cycles a week. Am I on
Right.
or way off on that?
Okay, well, so I'm trying to say how to say this scientifically. So it is true. It is true that sleep tends to occur in approximately 90-minute cycles.
Okay.
So first of all, note the word approximate, because we are all individuals. In a general population, it's typically approximate. And the fact that we have these approximate 90-minute cycles, sleep scientists were looking at sleep studies for about 10-15 years before they kind of figured it. So it's not that regular, right? So the correct way to approach it is to say that I need about 8 or between 8 to 10 hours of sleep on a daily basis. So let's just say that means over a period of 7 days, you need about 70 hours of sleep.
Right.
And you want to try and get 70 hours of sleep, hopefully mostly at night or using naps. The sleeping in 90 minutes is, as something that we sleep scientists would call bullshit. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's all good. Let it rip, Doc.
It was actually something. I want to say there is a sleep coach. I hate to say this, but there's no going around it. He's a sleep coach. He actually used to be a mattress salesman who started working with a few European teams, and for some reason he came out with this, sleeping in 90-minute cycles, and there's just so many things that are wrong with that.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear, because I've never looked into it. I've thought about what you're saying on the 8 to 10. I just always tell myself try to get 8 to 10.
Right. So 8 to 10 would be a better idea. And to me, when an athlete comes and says, well, they're trying to do this, to me, that's good news, because at least sleep is on their radar. They're already thinking of ways, they're trying to make this better. So which is why you want to educate and re-educate. There are a lot of, we live in the age of the so-called experts, and there are lots of, so-called experts, and, you want to make sure you have good information so you can make good informed, choices.
Well, no, I'm happy you said that, because it's it's nerve-wracking too, right? Because we do a podcast, we do this podcast, but we do a podcast just internally, just our group of everyone on the team, and our buddy asks us random questions. We don't know the questions that are coming, and we just answer them, right? There's no right or wrong. You just talk about it. But on one of the podcasts that we had, I was talking about how you can hear one thing, and then you can hear the exact opposite over the same topic. So it's like sometimes it's very confusing, because you don't know what you're hearing as information if you're caught in the wrong spot, the wrong time, or somebody sounds very confident, then you just believe them, and so you go, oh yeah, that makes sense, and then and you just don't know. So I think I think this is the greatest time that as an individual you do have to do your homework, because there are a lot of, like yourself, there's amazing experts out there, but then you've got to be able to do your own personal homework and really practice the information. For coaches, it's really tough to be a coach now, I think, too, because you could say one thing and then somebody can take that and go online and type it in, maybe it's slightly wrong, and come up with tons of different reasons to try to prove you wrong. And then we go down a rabbit hole of where's anybody going anywhere,
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, so it's a frustrating concept, but no, I love it, and that's good for me to hear too. And you're simplifying it as well, which is powerful. I always love that concept. But you said something earlier that I want to dive into, and I'm biased towards this because this is what Mindstrong does a lot with our teaching. We do a ton of heat exposure, cold exposure, breathing, obviously, and those sort of things. And you talked about hot showers before bed, and you said that early on. So hot shower, mobility, stretching. I don't know. I don't really know. So I'm just kind of asking blindly here. But is that the same protocol for everybody? Because I've actually tried recently in the last 6 months or so. I take a cold shower in the morning, which I absolutely love, and then I take a cold shower at night. Now, I'm not a professional athlete, so I can kind of routine my sleep. But I take a hot shower and then I finish cold at night, and I usually pass out like right away.
So let me explain to you the science why that works.
Okay.
So firstly, remember that circadian rhythm we were talking about?
Yeah.
So our body temperature has a circadian rhythm, and it begins to fall, and that is another signal that we are now ready to fall asleep.
Okay.
So that's one piece of information. And then, of course, it continues to fall until it becomes minimum, between 2 and 3 in the morning if you're going to bed at 11 and waking up at about 7. The second thing is that we're something called poikilothermic, which basically means that we have a thermostat in our brains. And so if you put us in a very cold environment, the reaction is that your core body, you start to shiver, so that your core body temperature increases. If you put us in a hot environment, we start to sweat, which is how our body temperature starts to fall. Now, if and I have a lot of athletes who ask me this, well, Dr. Singh, but aren't I supposed to take a cold shower? And a cold shower after you've played, for your body, for your muscles, etc., may be the right thing to do. But if you take a cold shower just before you go to bed, you're going to shiver, and that's going to increase your body temperature. And that's why that may be it may make it a little difficult for you to fall asleep. Now, if you were a snake, that would be perfectly fine, because snakes are, they don't have a thermostat, which is why when it's sunny, they have to find a shade. Because they have to get out of the heat, they have to get out of the cold, because that body temperature does what happens to the environment. So
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so simply the way that I'm hearing that is, if I take a warm shower, my body temperature is going to cool down. If I take a cold shower, my body temperature is going to go up. And you mentioned very early that we want to have a cool body temperature, cool room when we're going to sleep, and that makes a lot of sense to me, because I think of it as, if like the first thing that somebody does on a road trip, from my memory is, and I did it too, was we turned the air conditioning way up. And I've always looked at that. I shouldn't say always. I'm recently looking at that as, again, it's just an artificial thing. So could that affect your breathing in a room? Could that affect the air quality? I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I don't know the depths of it, but it's just been a really curious thing to try to understand. And that's a really good way of understanding the core temperature of using cold or using water. But what would you say on that air conditioning part? Because now, are you saying? Yeah, go ahead. I would say keep the bedroom cold and dark like a cave.
Yeah, that's what's best for sleep. So you may have heard of the saying, like, sleep cold. So you want to sleep cold. In fact, the room temperature, especially for athletes, should be between 65 to 67 degrees.
Okay.
Sometimes even cold, especially like large NFL players, other collision sports, they would say even colder than that. You can have blankets, to help you to stay warm. But that's what the recommendation is.
What about like camping? I went camping a few weeks ago and it was freezing outside. It was like 30 degrees.
Right.
And
did you sleep well?
well, no, but I mean, I was also
Okay.
camping, so I was on the floor. I was on a. I don't think. I mean,
Right.
I don't know. Maybe some people do. I was sleeping on the ground of like an un. I was in a woods, so it was like
Right. Right.
I was bad in
So
general, but
think
it was freezing outside.
right. I mean, I would say avoid extremes in temperature
Okay.
always. Like 30 degrees is just not
Yeah,
conducive
it's too
to
cold. Right.
it is too cold. I mean, and so if you think about our ancestors, if it was very cold, well, they had, mats and, grassy, whatever covering they could find to make sure that they were warm. But as the night continued, the temperature keeps dropping, right? As the night continues, until there's the sun rises and it becomes warm again. And, ideally you would want a smart thermostat in your room that would emulate that. It would keep dropping the temperature until it stabilized and then started increasing and warmed the temperature, and that would, you'd wake up, and when you would wake up, it would be warmer.
Yeah, and that's kind of that's where you do it the AC, right? Like you turn it down cool,
Yes.
and then you get out and you get into your natural day, and it should be warmer, and you should be moving forward, because that's kind of if I'm playing in Arizona, which I think I guess this is a bad example because I think they regulate the temperature for the Diamondbacks. So let's go to Texas, where I don't think where it could be 100 degrees. Does that extreme shift the guy, where if I'm sleeping in a 65 degree room and then I get up and it's 110 degrees outside, and then going to bed that night, do you sort of just say, do you stick to the protocol, like keep the evening cold at that degrees, or do you change degrees of room temperature depending on what the part of the country you're in?
Well, I think that typically what you'd want to do is you would want to make sure that the player is comfortable, keep the place cold. And, you're right. I mean, in Arizona, it'd be really, really hot outside, or in Texas. Now, the other thing that you didn't mention right now is the, altitude sleeping in, like, say, Denver.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Shoot.
And that itself could be an issue. So, and of course, Denver is not as high as, Colorado Springs, etc.
Right.
So it's sort of intermediate. But the one thing to remember is that because the air is thinner, which basically means there's slightly less oxygen in the air, so people do tend to sleep poorly. So sleep quality and continuity can be reduced. And then, and even healthy people can develop a breathing pattern at night. It's called periodic breathing, in which there's alternating deep and rapid breathing. And this itself can cause, poor sleep. And then you may wake up non-refreshed. So this is for visiting teams when they're coming to, flying into Denver. And really, the solution is simple. You have to keep well hydrated.
Yeah.
And Motrin for headaches, maybe melatonin for those who can't sleep. And again, I'm so sorry to say this, but no alcohol, because it makes it worse.
Yeah, listen up, fellas. No booze.
It does make it more difficult.
Does a player in Colorado who goes and plays, is there any research behind people who do live in that part of the country over duration of time? Do they acclimate to the low oxygen? I'm just thinking again, theorizing. Do they acclimate to that better?
Yes. And we know that they do, because I don't know if I'm sure you know of players who go who do altitude training.
Yeah.
Right. And what they do is that for a period of time you go play in a slightly higher altitude, because when you have slightly low oxygen levels, your hemoglobin carrying capacity of your blood increases.
Mm-hmm.
And so you sort of, and so it's called training, sleep low and train high.
Yeah.
That's another way. So you're sleeping in lower oxygen levels. And of course, so that's just something that people do. I'm sure that players who live there for a while, they definitely get acclimatized to it. And oftentimes when people visit from different places, the first couple of nights they may sleep poorly always,
Mm-hmm.
before they get used to that time zone, and then they get adjusted to it.
Well, and that's what I'm thinking, because if you're living in Colorado and you're increasing you basically be increasing your red blood cells and having better oxygen utilization. So I'd almost think that, that's why those Olympians and whatnot train out there, right? So they can be in better shape. So do they see anything in the big sports world of people who do live there? Are they better? This is just a question that I don't know if there's an answer to it. Are they better sleepers elsewhere? Or let's say you live in Florida, but then you play for the Rockies for the summer. Do you end up having is there any science of seeing high altitude teams travel better because they could be more, oxygenated in their blood system?
I don't know the answer to that, because
Yeah.
I don't think there is a study that looks at that specific question. Now, I would say that the vice versa, of course, is true. That is, visiting teams in the first couple of nights will have more difficulty sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
I think when, if you looked at players who were permanently living in a higher altitude, they would, after some time, they do get acclimatized to it. Their oxygen, carrying capacity does increase, but they probably have the same, distribution of sleep disturbances that would be in the general population. So there'd still be some players who'd have, issues with initiating and maintaining sleep, and if they did, they'd probably have it anywhere that they went.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And I kind of knew, I was thinking about that on the spot as I'm going to have to re-listen to this a lot, because there's a lot of things that you're saying that I'm going, oh man, I wish I could be taking heavy notes on that. And then I go, oh, I got to keep the question rolling. But that was something I thought about in the immediate, of just thinking about that sort of chemistry of an athlete if they shift, and you see that a lot in the free diving community of people who can do breath holding and whatnot. So that is fascinating. When you've mentioned a little bit about breathing, and I want to hammer that home. What are some breathing protocols, and generally just for anybody who's really listening? I know you could get deep into this and individualize depending on who needs what, but what are some sleep breathing protocols that you've had a lot of success with? And then, do you have to teach mechanically that, diaphragm that, nasal, mouth? Do you see any differences in how people breathe? And then how are some ways that generally anybody who's listening can take some breathing and incorporate that into their own planning?
I like that idea. Let's focus on one simple technique.
Okay.
And teach your audience that. So there is this technique. It's called the 4-7-8 technique, and it, the numbers don't matter, but but it's basically focusing on your breathing. So the way you do it is you empty your lungs of air, you breathe in quietly through the nose for about 3 to 5 seconds. Then you hold your breath for slightly longer, so 6 to 8 seconds, and then you exhale forcefully through your mouth, making a whoosh sound for about 8 seconds. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So,
I was just doing it.
and then you repeat that cycle, and because just deep breathing and concentrating on your breathing and breathing through your belly is something that works, because it sort of helps you relax. And I'll tell you why I like deep breathing. I like focusing on breathing exercises at night, because then instead of focusing on the fact that you're not sleeping or stressing on the fact that you're not sleeping, you're actually focusing on your breathing exercise, and that allows sleep to happen.
Yeah, it's a meditation form too, right? Is there
Hmm.
and so just so people can hear that. So you're before you start the practice, you're exhaling the air out. Are you doing that through
Right.
the nose or the mouth, or does it not matter?
Yeah, I don't think it matters, but you could, if it feels better, you can exhale through your mouth. But it's
Hmm.
basically concentrating and slowly breathing in, then holding your breath for slightly longer, and then breathing out even slower.
Hmm.
And then doing that, and trying to do that regularly, just concentrate on that. That itself is relaxing.
Yeah, no, I'm a huge believer, and I mean, I teach that. I teach breathing to everyone in
Oh,
many capacities, not just sleep. But I think it's cool for people I think people really need to hear that you're starting with that exhale, empty your lungs. Now let's get into it,
hmm.
and really focusing on that. And we do a lot of other stuff too. This is more of I wouldn't say that it's something I teach necessarily. I've always been a big fan being barefoot and grounding. And I know that was one of the
Uh-huh.
things that I was curious about if you've done anything with that
Oh,
in sleep, or anything that you
well,
can kind of take people through in that situation.
yes. So grounding, earthing, or grounded sleeping, it's just a process in which, an athlete, I shouldn't say athlete, anybody
Hmm.
can becomes grounded using an electrically conducted device. So, a person is grounded in indirect ways, like if you're barefoot, right?
Hmm.
And then when you have direct, continuous contact with the earth. But because of the way we live, and because our houses have well, they have floors, and you have insulating footwear. So there are different techniques, systems that you can use to the grounding systems. So there's the indirect way of earthing or grounding is based on they they can be sheets, they can be mats. I think I've heard of wrist or ankle bands,
Mm, I
and
have not.
or even,
Yeah.
yeah, even patches that you can use. They can be inside your footwear, and basically these devices get coupled to the earth by it's just a cord that you put into a wall outlet. So there's actually a study in 2019. It was a small study looking at grounding sleep, and they found that if you the same players, when they were when they had faster recovery, less pronounced markers of muscle damage and inflammation uh, when they were sleeping in a grounded way
Mm,
versus the sham grounding, which is basically sleeping in their own beds without that thing being plugged in.
yeah.
Now they didn't really measure sleep, but they definitely saw that because athletes, especially, they may have inflammation may be increased. They may be, especially after intensive exercises, and so this was just one way to maybe hasten exercises, the recovery. I have to tell you, it was a very small study.
Yeah,
It
no,
was done really.
I've tried to find a lot on grounding. I mean, I just personally have always been liked being barefoot, and and then I came across a doctor in Scottsdale that
Mhm.
just he slept grounded, and he was doing his own research on him and a few patients who were football players. Very small, it was a personal case study. In all of them, he showed a decrease in inflammation. Their testosterone had gone
Mhm.
up, and I can't remember. I don't want to speak to it too much of the melatonin, those sort of things, but he was talking about how it was increasing the sleep productivity and all those sort of things. And so to me, I was already walking around barefoot all the time. And then once I heard that, I
Mhm.
went, well, this sounds awesome.
Mhm.
I'm going to do it even more, and then sort of tell people to try it on their own. And then that's when I started learning about the grounding mats and those sort of things. And
Yep.
so I don't know that much. I've seen a few research articles. I'll send you a few too after this of some of the things
Mhm.
that I've found. But there isn't much out there, is there?
No, there really isn't. But I think as athletes look to maximize rest and recovery,
Yeah.
they're always looking for newer and newer things. I mean, I'm sure you've heard of those float tanks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I haven't done one yet.
Yes,
I need to.
right. So the good thing is that there was just some research that was published earlier this year. So I want to say it came out in January, and there was a randomized crossover, a randomized trial in which when these athletes, or actually I shouldn't say athletes because they were just subjects, healthy subjects, when they spent some time in the float tanks, they slept better after. So that I thought was good. And, so anything that reduces anxiety or stress, is good. I always like to tell players, patients, you want to try to do simple science-based, non-gimmicky things. But simple science-based, non-gimmicky things are always take more time, and always involve a little bit of self-discipline. It's like, but athletes, they understand discipline. You just have to, you just have to educate them so that they, so they know what they're doing is right. And, building good habits is something, they understand skills acquisition. So they understand that this might be useful to them.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I mean, and that's what makes people play longer anyways. In any profession, sustainability through discipline is key, right? And so,
yes.
And we've talked a lot about, I mean, this has been amazing information, and it's been a lot of fun learning this. And I think to switch gears still on obviously the sleep scheduling, but looking at an off season, that was something that was really important to me to try to understand as well, is because then, we've talked a lot about the changing of scheduling when you're in a season, but for all sports who are now out of season and they're at home all the time, and I'm just thinking of sleep banking as well. Does that matter as much, or does it do anything if I sleep bank for 5 months? Does that play a role? Or I'm just thinking because obviously that's when you can really discipline your sleep in the off season and train a certain way. But can you kind of go into the depths of kind of generalizing and simplifying the off season and how we can improve that?
Right. So the best advice is to prioritize maximizing sleep during your off season, and think of it as a free health prescription. Don't underestimate its training value. Like, it's creating good habits while you're off. And as you know, most of the good players, they already have some sort of schedule, right? There's a time they train. They want to keep their nutrition on track. And you add sleep to that. And if you're off season, you have the luxury of sleeping aligned to your circadian clock. So take advantage of that. If you're a night owl and you fall asleep at, 2 a.m. and you want to sleep till about 10 or 11, well, do that on a regular basis. So bring regularity to your sleep schedule. The one thing I want to mention is that, and I tell all teams that, because when it comes to addressing sleep disorders, once the season begins, players have no time.
No.
So, sort of prioritize getting your health in order. So especially if you have problems with insomnia or sleep apnea or any sort of sleep disorder, that is when you want to go get it checked out during your off season. So in my niche practice, when I see elite athletes, in my practice, in my office, I typically see them in the off season, because that's when they have time to now come and, as elite athletes, they can go anywhere for their care.
Sure.
So, that's the time they want to come in and get themselves evaluated.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? And that's important information for people to comprehend. And then if you're not an athlete, to try to hammer that home and get your 8 to 10, 7 days a week, and make sure you're executing that. I'm definitely taking with me the sleep banking. That's been really crucial for me personally, because I'm pretty aware of when I'm going to miss sleep leading up to things. Like, I knew I wouldn't sleep that much on that camping trip, and it was 2 days, so I could have slept banking or built some equity up before that. And I think that's going to be really crucial. And then I really like how in the beginning You touched on no electricity. I don't know. I didn't know if that was a placebo effect or not, but I don't sleep with my phone in my room. I always have that
Mm-hmm.
outside of my room, and if it
Mm-hmm.
is in my room every now and then, which it does make it in my room every now and then, I have it on the
Mm-hmm.
floor. So, but it's still in my
Mm-hmm.
room, and this is why I mentioned the placebo effect, because I really do feel like I don't sleep as well if my phone is in my room, even if it's on my floor. Is that
I act
placebo?
Yes, yes. I was going to say that there is actually a study that shows that doctors who are on call,
Yeah.
when they sleep, even if they don't get called at all, their sleep is still lighter. They still get less deep sleep because it's sort of, it's like a, a part of you is always slightly hyper aroused, and
Yeah.
you're aware that you may be woken up, and so yes, that is based on science.
That is fascinating. I have thought about that. I've said that to people. I've said I felt that and I didn't know. I didn't know that. And that was kind of another thing I was thinking about, because do you use, that was one of the questions I was curious to ask you, of alarm clocks, right?
Hmm.
Do you tell people to use an alarm clock? Like if you're that 2 to 11 window that we just mentioned, if you're a night owl, you go to sleep at 2, you wake up at 11, doing that in an off season. Uh, do you just kind of try to get people to train themselves to do that on their own and not wake up at an alarm clock, or do you set an alarm clock?
Well, actually, I am a proponent of alarm clocks. I
Okay.
like alarm clocks because they kind of help you be regular. You also give you a peace of mind. You don't uh, you don't feel that you may
Wake
sleep
up.
through
Yeah.
something important, right.
Yeah.
So and I in my practice, I often see people who don't set an alarm, but they keep looking at their clocks in the middle of the night to make sure that they don't miss waking up on time, and that can cause anxiety and make it hard to sleep.
Hmm.
So it's it's okay to set an alarm because it sometimes allows for safer feeling during the night. What I don't like is I do not like the snooze button. So
Okay.
that
Yeah.
that is a big no-no. So I would say, set your alarm to the latest time you can wake up and still make it to wherever you need to make it on time. But if you and then set your alarm clock away from your bed so that you have to get up, and you have to get out of bed to turn the alarm off and then go from there to the bathroom or wherever you need to go. But every time you hit the snooze, you sort of ruin the last few minutes of your sleep, and you don't need to do that.
Yeah. Does that, is there is there science behind that too? Like hitting snooze every time?
Yes, yes. I mean, uh, if you keep hitting snooze, you're so let's assume that you set an alarm for 7 but didn't get out of bed till
Yeah. Oh,
7:45, and
yeah. Yeah.
you hit your snooze, half a dozen times or so in the middle of. Well, you just ruined the last 45 minutes of sleep. If you know you're going to wake up at 7:45, set your alarm for 7:45, and like I said, use it and then get out of bed. Don't ruin the last few. And that actually, the most times you hit the snooze, it lends to that feeling of grogginess when you wake up.
Yeah, and I mean, I've experienced it sounds I mean, that is such an issue too, is, and I love to just get up, have it across the room, turn it off. And I
Right.
mean, I usually wake up a little bit. I can sort of tell what time it is, because I said I got those blinds, which I don't sleep completely dark. I know I kind of mentioned that, but I can kind of tell what time it is. I usually wake up probably like 10, 15 minutes before my alarm. It feels like every morning. And then I just kind
Yeah.
of lay there, and then once it gets off, like I said, my alarm's outside of the room. So I'll wake up, turn it off. And now I'm standing up. And then my first thing I've always done is what you've mentioned. I just open up all my blinds so that
Yeah.
my room and the environment I'm in has somewhat of the awakening of the sunrise. And then, then I try to drink water so I don't go back to sleep.
Right. And Harvey, you even if there are windows, even if you have, for people who don't have, who want it to be dark and their windows doesn't allow that, well, that's what a nightshade, a mask is for.
Hmm.
People can use that to help them sleep, so that
Yeah.
they can block off the light.
No,
It's just something.
I love that concept. There's a lot of things I'm going to take away from this in my personal life, and I know a lot of people who are listening to this will get some stuff as well. And as I kind of keep segueing us through here, you've touched on a lot on anxiety or pressures, and I love the concept of if your phone is in your room, it layers some sort of anxiety or something along those
Hmm.
lines. I mean, can you go into the depths about the psychology and thinking process of the mind with sleep and some of those things that people can be very aware of for what this does for their mind?
So, are you talking about wearables or?
Well, just
Uh,
like through the night, like I mean, I've felt that, but I've
I see.
never known. If you're on call, like what does that do throughout your day? Does that ruin? Like, can that come back to get you in the future? Like, is that creating anxiety in your day if you have phones in your
Right.
room?
Yes, it does. Well, it can, because having a phone in your room can, it really does disturb your sleep, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, uh, because all of us lead really busy lives. By the time we get home, we all think we need to unwind, and often the unwinding is in the form of either a television or playing on the computer, or scrolling on the video games. And we've already talked about light and
Mm-hmm.
how that prevents you from falling asleep. But but the one thing I would like your audience to know is that poor sleep itself is a risk factor for anxiety and depression,
Mm-hmm.
or stress, or stress, and vice versa. So stress, anxiety, depression can affect your sleep and ruin both the quality and the quantity of sleep. Right? So the relationship between sleep and stress, or sleep and anxiety, and sleep and mood disorders or depression is a very close, it's a bi-directional relationship. And so it's important to know this, because when we are talking about any sort of mental health issues,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if this is the question you were asking me, but
No, it's great.
any, but if you're talking about mental health issues, you cannot talk about mental health unless sleep health is addressed. Sleep health needs a seat at that table. And so it's really, really essential to sleep well. Now what happens is that anything, because we live in very stressful environment, and because we're sort of hyper aroused during the day, so that can spill over into the night, and as a result of that, you may not get enough sleep. You may wake up, you may have frequent awakenings, you may have less deep sleep, and that's just something that we should be aware of. So think back when we were hunters and gatherers. If we were stressed out because we were in danger, well, you didn't want to sleep. You
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be awake, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you had to protect yourself. And so the problem now, of course, is that people suffer from chronic stress. People suffer from chronic anxiety. And so sleep, it gets affected. And so, and of course, this, in problems with initiating or maintaining sleep, despite the opportunity to sleep, is a unique set of sleep issues. And if you have that, you want to go and go talk to your primary care doctor and see if you can talk to a sleep specialist so that this can be addressed. And this is if once you've done everything, once your bedroom is cold, it's dark, you're not drinking alcohol or caffeine too close to your bedtime, you're not chewing tobacco in the middle of the night or smoking, and you're doing all the right things, and if you're still not sleeping, well, then it's time to seek help.
Mm. Yeah, and that's I wonder, do you become the fallout? Do you become part of and obviously not to use any examples, but have you had to have some really in-depth conversations with people about, because this has to lead into the part where you've got to be doing more coaching than just talking about sleep. You've probably get deep
Right.
into people's personal lives and really have to dive into that. Is that how are some ways that even coaches could improve through your experiences of how you've funneled people into the right paths if there is any sort of
Right.
mental ill health going on.
Well, so, speaking of coaches, I mean, think of the work that coaches do.
Yeah.
Coaches do knowledge work.
Mm-hmm.
Which gets affected if you get less sleep. Coaches do communicate. They're supposed to communicate, and we know that if you get less sleep, you don't communicate as efficiently, and we know that if you get less sleep, it affects your health. And coaches are typically older, so their health is also, significantly affected, right? So
Mm-hmm.
with that background, it's really important to speak with coaches. I mean, also, you want to talk to coaches because oftentimes coaches decide players' schedules,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they can affect a player's sleep. You want to talk to coaches because coaches themselves can be good role models for players,
Right.
or bad role models,
Yeah,
or
for
bad
sure.
models for from players. And I think you were also alluding to sleep coaching on my behalf. I
Yep.
think
Yeah,
at that
absolutely.
question, right?
Absolutely.
And I I have to tell you that whenever I work with a team, apart from working as a team, as a whole organization, I also work one-on-one on players because really, like I said, you have to have clear, candid conversations with players to understand where they're coming from so that you can help them with their sleep issues. I mean, this is why privacy is important. I mean, I typically never speak about individual players
Right.
because, that's just something that, I have the privilege of speaking to them, and I don't think I need, I don't need to talk about that in public.
Yeah, no, and that's where I mean, you have a profession that I've got to assume gets very personal, right? And so that's, there's
Yeah,
a lot weighing on it because sleep has, I mean, I think somewhat of our conversation, I've always looked at performance very simply becoming breath, nutrition, movement, and sleep. I mean, those were always the pillars
yeah,
of, if you can execute those, they all feed off each other, right? If you breathe well, you eat, you digest well. If you digest well, you move well. If you move well, go to sleep and recover well, and it's just kind of
right.
continuous in that. And then over time, you obviously can create your own social circles and those sort of things. But, just for when you generalize sleep and some of those things for people to understand, and maybe people are not taking sleep as serious when you're looking at the coaches. For coaches who are going to listen to this, I mean, have you found anything? It's kind of hard to. I don't want to narrow it to one sport, but have you seen like what's some of the general science behind validating like 8 to 10 hours of sleep, non-stressful sleep? Everything we've talked about, pre-gaming for sleep, getting away from some of those worries or anxieties, and the strength gains that people are getting, or maybe some of the metrics that you found that are, faster speed, faster, more weight they can push. Just some general things for sports that coaches could sort of create an idea of why they should take a very high intentional focus on how they schedule planning for the players, and they'll see more benefit in their actual athletic performance.
Oh, okay. So there is actually a lot of research.
I'm
So there's
sure.
already a lot of research looking at sleep extension specifically in ball players. So there was a study. It came out a couple of years ago, and it looked at just 5 nights of sleep extension. So these are professional baseball players from one of the MLB teams, and there was a 13% improvement in cognitive processing speed. Their reaction time was 122 milliseconds faster.
Wow.
And you know, if I remember, a fastball takes about 400 milliseconds, right?
Yeah, something
To,
ridiculous
to
like that. Yeah.
yep, to travel from a pitcher to a hitter. So obviously, batters have to have optimal visual search strategies to distinguish all the different kind of pitches. And so this was a study. This was research led by Cherry Ma, And
Okay.
so they did a randomized controlled trial during a 4-week training camp, and these were 17 MLB players, and they were randomized to either get 5 nights of sleep extension, or 5 nights of habitual sleep. And when they were getting only about half an hour to 45 minutes extra sleep on the sleep extension night, and still there was significant improvement in their performance. So that's number one. And I don't know if you've heard about that of plate discipline, which is much better in the beginning of the season rather than September. And it's because as the season progresses, fatigue accumulates, and as a result, strike zone judgment gets worse. So,
wow.
There are a lot of studies that show that sleep extension results in improvement in sports-specific measures and improvement in alertness, while sleep deprivation affects sport-specific measures and makes them feel, grumpy and worse out of when they're not playing. So, it's kind of important. I think it's important to discuss this with athletes and teams as a whole, because that helps change behavior when they have access to that information.
Yeah, and then you've mentioned it already. I mean, they'll do it if you can help them get the knowledge, make them aware. They'll discipline themselves to do it. I think it's amazing stuff, Dr. Singh. I really do. It's really important for the whole of an organization to focus. I think of, when I played in college, we had coaches who, great people, right? But we'd have these early morning practices, and it would always be no one's practicing like we are. And I used to always think, well, we're not getting anything done.
Exactly.
And none of us
right.
are moving well.
Right.
We're not thinking well. It's hard to get your body moving. I think, sorry. I also think that you said something on one of these seminars that I listened to you speak on, that athletes are typically, and I could be way off, but did you say that in the 4 to 7 window is typically when you're the most loose or available to perform?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's when games are for the most part.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where you've opened up my eyes mostly is if you get the sleep, if you go to sleep I had a guy I worked with last year who'd go to sleep at 3-4 in the morning and always try to get up early to get the sun. And to repeat that, I'm going to definitely have him listen to this, to sleep, just sleep and go to the field as late as you possibly can.
Yes.
And then that 4 to 7 o'clock window is when your body's going to start sort of getting loose and those sort of things. But is there anything you want to go in depth on that 4 to 7 o'clock p.m. window, or was that really I thought that was awesome when I heard you say that.
Yes. Yeah, that is just a time, where peak performance tends to occur. Now, always there are two separate things. First is to make sure you get enough sleep. Second, of course, is to be a little mindful of your circadian clock. And the other thing is that athletes need to have regular goalposts. It's such a long season. Just make sure that you regularly are getting enough sleep so that you're not so sleep deprived that you say, well, forget it, I'm not even going to bother,
Mm-hmm.
And so you want to keep them inspired and so that they're always implementing and applying what they've learned.
It's awesome. Well, as we kind of close it down here and think about just yourself personally, and I think it's really be interesting to just kind of lay it on us of what I think it's really interesting. I'm very fortunate to speak to people like yourself, and I get the fortunality. Part of it is that I get to learn, a few times and get to ask the questions. And I think that that's really cool. But, anyone that I get to speak to in the field of human performance, I'm very grateful for. But I've always been very curious of how you personally learn off of your own intuition. Obviously I know that you read a lot of science, you have a great background, and you're around a lot of intelligent people, but intuitively, you've thought of some amazing things to help people, and you've advanced the sports world and people's lives for that matter, which is probably the most important part. But what is it intuitively that gets you to learn? Like, how have you learned how to learn?
I'll tell you, I love that question because I absolutely agree with you that, I have learned and intuitively changed the way I've practiced in the last 6 or 7 years.
Mm.
And I've really learned from feedback from players as well as, say, athletic trainers who can really be your best allies. Athletic trainers have the players' ears. They can tell you a lot about players. Mm-hmm. Now, I would say that sleep science is complex, right? There are really complex issues. Obviously I'm constantly updating my scientific knowledge. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to speaking to players, you want to boil all these complex ideas to its simplest level. And you want to make it simple because if it's simple, then players will, they'll want to follow it. So that's number one. Number two is, I really think that you have to give players regular goalposts through the season to keep teaching them, to keep reinforcing, because the season is just long.
Yeah.
It really is long. And number three is that, this is a game. This is a field of relationships, and you want to build a rapport because sleep is such a deeply personal thing. You have to establish a rapport. You have to have clear, candid conversations and establish trust so that they can talk to you, and then you can give them solutions that fit into their lifestyles, fit into their schedules, and I would say, and intuitively, that is how I have transformed my practice over the last few years.
Yeah, that's amazing. I was going to ask that too. I mean, what is your personal practice? Like, what is your personal standard of how you optimize your sleep?
Well, I have to say that I am a good sleeper, mm-hmm. But the two things that I believe in are, number one is regularity. I'm very regular, and of course, I have the ability to be regular because of my schedule. Mm-hmm. I can do that. And number two is, I really believe in keeping the bedroom cold and dark. And I know I keep coming back to this, but
yeah, no, I like it.
I see so many athletes, who, they're playing video games, and then they're playing video games, like we discussed earlier, with each other, with other team members. So they're keeping other people awake on the team, or it's, they're having aches and pains. The room is too hot. They've got like a television set which is on in the background. They have, radio going off, or, they're playing a video game and then they're on the telephone with somebody on another coast. So really, to be selfish about your sleep really helps. Mm.
That's you nailed that. I mean, that's that's awesome, and I think that's something that I can take with myself too. I try to stay extremely strict on my sleep and try to avoid in-depth conversations at night too. Right, mm-hmm. Like I don't want to be solving problems. I don't want to be having deep conversations, and I don't want my mind turned on to be thinking like that before I try to close my eyes and go to sleep, and the time you're giving is amazing. I appreciate all this as we kind of funnel it in. We like asking all our guests this, and I'm really curious to really get to the depths of, I don't know that many, I haven't had that much opportunity to talk to people like yourself in the sleep game. And I'm obviously a huge mm-hmm. believer in it. I've been a good sleeper majority of my life. It's a place of peace for me. I mean, it's like a sanctuary. Mm-hmm. So I try to keep it like that. And I've always thought that was just a really special thing to do. But, something has to run in deeper than you just helping athletes, I'm sure. So I just think it's always cool to ask people like yourself who are so high in the game and they're in a position where they get to influence so many people. What's your why? What's your purpose of enhancing people's lives through sleep? What is the struggle that seems worth struggling for in your own in your own life that makes you want to advance humans in this specific category?
Well, that's, again, another very good question. Somebody else recently asked me that. And, one thing I saw, because I do work with a lot of, top elite athletes, Olympic players. I do work with some, top CEOs, really high achievers. And what I found is that, they're all looking for something. And, oftentimes after they've achieved the goal they wanted, after they've got that big prize, they've won the gold medal, they've won the World Series, they won the Super Bowl, even after all of that, they're still somewhat underwhelmed by what they have achieved.
Yeah.
I don't know if
I've experienced that. Yeah.
exactly, right. And so, and it's because, right, and I think it's because we're searching for answers in the wrong place. And I to me, I feel that it is a journey. It's a journey of self-discovery. Some, spiritual practices, meditative practices, building a strong community and building a network of good, solid friends is really what keeps you going. I mean, that's how we got introduced, right? Dr. Fergus Connolly and I, we've been, this is a business of relationships. And, and so I don't know if I answered your question, but
no, you nailed it beautifully. I mean, I'm happy that I asked. I really am, because that was an amazing answer, and it's inspiring. I mean, and you're right too. I mean, I don't know how I get to be so fortunate to get to be able to speak to people like yourself and Dr. Conley. He's an amazing human, and I'm grateful for all the time he's given me, and he's shown me and taught me a lot. And I get an opportunity to sit here and ask the questions, like I said, and listen to you, and it means a lot to me. So, and and again, I'll end it here, the sense of, I think that that's the greatest thing that we can do for humans, is give away our time. And so the time that you've given me, and for people who would listen to this, I mean, sleep is such an important thing, and to be able to execute it and discipline yourself in it and improve is going to make you better for those relationships. And I hope that a lot of people get a lot of that out of this, as I know I did. I mean, I know that you did a lot for just speaking of the science of sleep and a lot of stuff that athletes can do, which is amazing. But everyone can improve our sleep, and we can do that as a world, right? And we'll be better off for that, for people in our relationships and our advancement in our own self. But Doctor, I think that from myself and Mindstrong, I mean, thank you so much for giving the time away and sharing so much information. I look forward to sharing it with people. And I also look forward to following your journey. I think it's amazing what you're doing for sports. Like I said, I've watched a lot of your YouTube clips and things that you've spoke at. I was really excited to jump on this podcast with you and be able to get to do this in over the phone, obviously. And so I just thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for being on with me and taking all that time to instill a lot of information. So I really appreciate that.
No, thank you for giving me a platform.
Absolutely. I'm happy we were able to do it. So, well, hey, we will, I will talk to you soon. I'll let you know when we release this. And is there anything that people can do to find you or learn more from you before you sort of leave here, just so if people can kind of, to learn more, how could they do that on your platforms?
I do have a website. It's called MeetaSinghMD.com. And so maybe you can, add a link.
Yep, I will do that.
It's just my name spelled out. And then I am on Twitter. It's @AthleteSleepMD1.
Okay.
And then I am present on LinkedIn too. So yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get that out there, and we'll send some people towards your circuits. And hey, have a great year this year, and go change some lives. Look forward to learning more.
Thank you. Thanks, Harvey.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, take it. Bye-bye.
Cheers.